supported. One thing I would like to tell you that obviously all of us engaged in this, and I'm using Africa as, as a continent, and obviously I'm working in other areas of the world, but Africa is an excellent example because we really advanced a lot. One thing that it's extremely important for me to mention is that right now within the Horizon, which is one of the major instruments funding research and innovation in European countries, EU member states, but also partnering countries when they can apply, there is a special instrument called Africa Initiative, where already we have instrument in place that can actually help to facilitate this cooperation, and that funding is available. European Innovation Council also has an instrument that can support activities like this. However, we feel that this is not sufficient. So during Mauritius conference, we touched upon, and of course, with the new commission coming in Brussels very soon, we will also raise into one important issue, and that is like how to develop novel financial instruments that besides, Horizon Africa Initiative could be in place to foster this collaboration, not only between research institutions, but also with, involving private sector, which everybody considers extremely important. Let me also say one other thing, that some of the examples that I just mentioned with the WETSUS and its partners through the Water for All, obviously centers in Africa are ready to engage not only through European funding, but there is additional funding that you should be aware of, where African countries themselves put together a budget, which is called a Regional Science and Innovation Fund, which out of Nairobi, Kenya, where 12 countries are already co-funding this. The World Bank provided additional funding, and the Korean government also provided some huge portion of the funding. Through this RCIP program, there are 3 windows that essentially countries themselves in Africa are funding to cooperate internationally, among other topics, in water as well. RCIP funds 3 things, as I said. One is through the sandwich program, they send their students to international organizations that are being pre-selected, and those universities in Africa that could apply for RCIP are also pre-selected through the strong international evaluation. And the student can essentially spend time 2 to 3 years doing research in European or any other international partner country. A lot of them went to Korea because Korea is co-funding this, some of them in US and some of them are in Europe. And essentially, jointly, they define what will be the topic of the PhD research. But these students are, required to return back to Africa. And then we also, through RCIP, have a program that World Bank is funding where they could develop independent career. Very quickly, it's important that when these students come back to their own host countries, that they can be independent researchers. Africa does have a challenge in water and related topics in the number of PhDs. So it's extremely important for us to empower African countries to have enough PhDs. Second window that RCIP is funding is one which is focused on research only, and where essentially international partner from Europe or any other part of the world can apply to RCIP funding together with their partners in Africa. And the third one is where they need to essentially engage private sector. We call these innovation projects. And I would like to say a couple things here in kind of like, I would say like a take-home messages from my presentation, which is short, of course, but this topic by itself requires kind of longer time. But I'm really glad that in Africa, through these projects with RCIP and African Centers of Excellence, we are really feeling that water being important topic could be excellent example for other areas of science that are important for Africa. Second to water, obviously, is agriculture, which is, all African countries are hugely depending on agriculture, and water and agri really overlap. Of course, environmental challenges that water also has a part in it are important. So I'm actually, after like 12 years working on this project, I can say that this could be excellent pilots and excellent learning experiences for all of us in the World Bank, in European Commission, African Union, and all the experts, where essentially other areas of science could learn from these topics. And the last thing I would like to say, and important information to share with you, African Union, which is counterpart of European Commission, and European Commission have signed one document, which is very important to all of you and all of us actually to keep in mind, and that is African Union, European Commission Innovation Agenda, which is strategic document that covers over next decade. It was signed last year in Brussels in July, actually a year ago, and water is one of the strong, very important topics. So this means that whatever it has been done that I just shared with you, it is just beginning, because obviously there is a document in Brussels signed by the two sides, as well as African countries themselves are working on financial instruments that will be available. So it is extremely important that we do see that obviously international cooperation, exchange, funding instruments, mobility between researchers and students are things that we should be focusing from this point on. So these are actually, couple of the things I wanted to share, and thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you very much, Danica. I think that's an incredibly interesting perspective on how this cooperation on research and education capacity building between Europe and Africa really does showcase how this cooperation can go across borders. We'll now move on to a cross interview. So this is we're going to take a break from all the challenges that we've had online. So we'll give the technical team a little bit of time to sort out the rest of the issues, and we'll come back in person. And this will be through a cross interview that will be led by Ella Darcy. And I'll just ask Ella and Arnau and Andrea to come to the stage, and Ella will take charge of this next session. Thank you.
This is working. Rava, now? Do you hear me now? Wow. So thank you everybody for being here. It's such an emotion to be here. Lastly, I have been used to conduct such meeting online. So I'm not used anymore to do such meetings in presence. But yeah, it's an honor to be here, and thank you to all of you for being here. So I am Ella Daci. I am working for IHE Delft, which is Institute for Water Education. What we do better, well, capacity building and trainings. So I'm going to be moderating this session, and this session is going to be about a discussion on global challenges on water perspectives. And we are going to have perspectives from European Commission international partnerships, as well as from the Mediterranean perspective. So here I'm going to have my two panelists, Mr. Arnaud Devessé and Mr. Andrea Tinagli. Arnaud, he's a team leader at European Commission working for international partnerships. Actually, he's managing 1 billion euros for water challenges for international partnerships. He's also a member of the Committee of Climate Investor 2 with around 8,100 million on water investment fund for developing countries. He has been head of the section rural development for Rwanda, as well as he has been capacity development manager for EuropeAid, policy officer, nutrition for international affairs. So thank you for being here. And as well as we have here Mr. Andrea Tinagli. Actually, he's a principal advisor for the Union for the Mediterranean and for Sustainable Finance and Investments. He's also representing the European Investment Bank at the UFN. Andrea, he has been working for European investment banks for decades. He has been head of the Italian delegation, head of the Spanish delegation. He has been also head of the holding funds for Southern Europe. So thank you for being here. You to be the first to reply to this question.
Thank you very much. So I think it's a challenging question. It's very wide, but I will try to reply. And a good afternoon to everybody. So it's the honor for me to be here this afternoon, and just wanted maybe first to reflect. So we are spending together with the EIB 3.7 billion euros in investments under official development aid. So it's really aid development for each multi-annual financial framework, more or less. So every 7 years. So it's a lot of money, and we have committed to give access, to improve the access to water and sanitation to 70 million people by 2030, during the UN Water Conference of 2023. So we are trying to go bold on that one, and trying to have an alliance between what EIB is doing and what we are doing under the Global Gateway Initiative to really mobilize at scale investments and de-risk investments globally. But this is not enough. And so what we are trying to do is to really build this continuum between what we say the governance, the skills, and the finance. So the governance, it's obvious. Huh? It's obvious, but it's always good to say it again. If we want to invest, we need to have a regulatory system in place. And it's not obvious everywhere. We have a lot of African countries, etc., where it doesn't exist. And that's the first challenge. But on top of that, it's not only a regulatory system. It's also to know what you are spending in water. How much have you been really spending? What have been the efficiency of your spending? Are you really spending what you are committing on the table, etc.? The World Bank new report from Funding a Water Secure Future that has been published last week said that 72% only of the finance available and committed is spent. So it means that there is huge gap in efficiency in this sector. So this is really something that needs to be taken. It's not only a question of investment gap. The second thing is skills. You need to have very skilled people on the ground that can deliver at scale. And this is what we are trying to support with water operators partnerships. People that are providing services in a transparent, efficient, dynamic way, appealing for the investors. And there again, the World Bank report is appealing. There is a 37% efficient technical efficiency gap in the water sector. So meaning that we could improve by 37% all the efficiency of the investments in developing countries. So this is really a huge gap, and we need to look at that. And for that, you need skills, and you need developers and operators that are active, efficient on the ground. And finally, you need the finance. And for that, of course, it's not that easy, but for that, you need to de-risk a bit. And this is what we are trying to do with notably guarantees and systems like that. So I will stop there because we have a very short time, but that's only a first overview of where we can go to try to mobilize investments at much more scale if we want to really achieve what we want to do in these developing countries. And also, there are a lot of opportunities arising from that, because as we are developing investments all around the world, we see that there is a big pipeline of big investments in developing countries, with an idea to make them much more sustainable, to go towards cost recovery, to go towards more transparency, digital, etc. tools. And for that, there is a big pipeline of projects and a need for research, for private sector engagement, etc., together with us on the ground. So that's it.
It works, so I can continue with this micro now. Thank you very much. Well, as a continuation of what Arnaud was just saying, I'm fully aligned with its ideas, but I can add that in terms of having a correct and effective governance, then and pushing collaborative frameworks, we really need to foster the creation of both permanent partnership or organization. And I'm representing, and I am board member for the EIB at the Union for the Mediterranean. So focusing mainly on the border countries of the Mediterranean, so the southern neighborhoods of North Africa, and having an agency or an organization that is combining both policy dialogues with technical dialogues at the level of regional platforms. It's really a plus that all countries should really leverage on to find this cooperation and this international collaboration. But there are also new initiatives within the European Union through the Team Europe initiative that is exactly this, try to provide a unique and a common framework for at different levels, European Union, member states, EBRD, EIB, so the multilateral development banks that are part of the European architecture, with private banks to cooperate in a unique and a way to achieve a better coordination and better results. Concerning capacity building, absolutely necessary. We need to support the capacity not only within Europe, but also outside Europe in our partner countries to have the technical abilities to prepare projects. And only through technical assistance to training, partnership, research and development, as we heard before, we can achieve this technical preparation that then will allow financiers to put the enormous quantity of money that is needed to finance this initiative. We can have on one side the typical grant support through donors' resources, but we need also to combine resources through loans, equity, and also guarantee to make the project sufficiently risky, with a level of riskiness acceptable for banks, and that we can finance. So a blending approach, try to better combine grants with revolving instruments, so equity and loans, trying to de-risk the project. And here the EFSD Plus guarantee, so the main instrument of the NDC Global Europe, so the instrument of the European Commission for this multi-annual financial framework that, if I'm not wrong, is around 30 billion euros, providing guarantees not only to the EIB, but also to other players to increase the risk that they can assume and incorporate when financing a project. And finally, the other element is to have more and more integrated water resource management. So having an holistic approach, looking at the risk and at the impact of water, not on a standalone basis, but with the implication that it has on other type of activity. I'm thinking about the WEFE nexus, so water, energy, food, and environment. This is more and more necessary to have really an holistic and a global analysis of what a water project should be and what are the implications that we must not only identify ex ante, but then monitor and report in a constant way.
Thank you very much, Andrea. It's still not working. It's working. Yeah, thank you very much. Very good insights. I really like the capacity building and training, obviously, because I come from that sector. So, so my next question is going to be, what kind of initiatives can be implemented to ensure long-term water security for local communities worldwide? Concrete.
Okay, so I think you touched upon a bit the integrated water resource management. So that's the core of the thing. Of course, we always come back to that. And in the core of the Water Framework Directive in Europe is the river basin management plans. We know that. So the quick question is, if you want to ensure water security, you need to plan on the long term and to integrate the next generation actions that you need to put in place. So I would like so basically, you need to look at these climate risk assessments. You need to do a climate risk assessment first of your planning, so to understand where you are going to be in 5, 10 years, 20 years. And then after, you need to consider different types of solutions in your basin. So usually we look at this water basin management plan and say, okay, we are going to do this and that, this amount of wastewater treatment, this amount of water action, etc. But you have other alternatives that we very often do not consider enough. For instance, and alternatives that are more climate resilient, notably, and will ensure security for the people. And one of them is nature-based solutions. So what can we replace? What kind of gray infrastructure we can replace with green infrastructures, with nature-based solutions that will really improve the resilience of the system? How can the private sector can engage that in context, notably, of the water stewardship principles? That's the first thing. The second thing, are you going to manage the storage issue? Artificial storage or nature-based storage in the soil. We know that green water is the most part of the water that we have on this planet Earth. 60% of the precipitations comes from green water, water from the soils, not fresh water in the rivers. We always look at fresh water in the rivers and lakes, etc. But we need to look also at the other part that is the most important part. Then after, we have to look at the non-conventional uses. Sometimes we have a very tendency to go immediately towards, let's say, let's plant a build and do a desalination plant. Desalination should be the last resort solution. In the meantime, we really have to plan much more according to the use, notably of non-conventional possibilities, like water reuse, looking at non-revenue water much more in a much more deep way, etc., etc. So we have all these non-conventional possibilities that are there, and sometimes we have done some scenario, notably in Uganda, for instance, where we have seen that you can delay an investment in big gray infrastructures by 30 years just by looking at non-conventional uses. So that's super important also. So that's it. And maybe if I have time after, I will come back to the last point, but okay, thank you very much.
Yes, just to complement what has been said, I would like to use an example that try really to summarize and put together all the elements that we mentioned before in terms of how to maximize the cooperation, the international cooperation. And this is through a real example, a real initiative that we launched on the 23rd of May that is called the Blue Mediterranean Partnership. So this is really an international partnership that intends to accelerate the deployment in the Mediterranean area, in the non-EU countries of the southern neighborhood of the Mediterranean, of sustainable, bankable blue project. So we are speaking not only about water, we are speaking about blue economy that under the definition, the vast definition that we use for this initiative, include also the traditional water infrastructure in terms of desalination, in terms of water treatment plant, and so on top of other typical blue economies activities. In this case, in order to accelerate the deployment of sustainable projects, but also bankable projects that need to obtain financing for multilateral development banks, we have put together different stakeholders. First of all, the countries, the beneficiary countries in the southern neighborhood, that they should indicate which strategic lines of investment should be followed. And in this case, it's a platform that is open to all the southern neighborhood countries. But for the moment, we are active in Egypt, Morocco, Jordan, because we consider the Red Sea also having a huge impact on the Mediterranean. So also projects in the Red Sea are considered. But we are opening, we are having discussion now with Lebanon and then Tunisia to join the initiative as beneficiary countries. But then for the banks, and multilateral development banks that wants to finance, and they have a lot of resources to be dedicated to water and blue economy project in the Mediterranean, thanks also to the de-risking element of the EFSD+, so the guarantee that they receive. And I'm thinking about the EIB, EBRD, AFD, so Agence Française de Développement, KfW for Germany, Cassa Depositi e Prestiti for Italy. They also adhere to this partnership to manage resources that some sovereign donors are providing for technical preparation. What the banks are lacking for are grants for upstream project preparation. So we fulfill this gap by asking sovereign donors to provide resources managed through a multi-donor trust fund administered by the EBRD, where all the donor resources are put together. And we have already 22 million euros of resources from SIDA, so Sweden, from France, from Germany, from Spain, from DG Mare, and very soon we hope also to receive contribution from DG NEAR and others, that thanks to those resources, the banks can request those technical assistance to prepare projects, make those projects bankable, and then finance altogether through a syndication. So this is why this technical assistance is not just for study made from third parties, but is since the very beginning managed by the financial institution that intends to finance the project in questions. On the 23rd of May, we created the steering committee, co-chaired by the UFM, by myself and Sweden, and we have the trust fund that is already functioning in London through the EBRD, and we have this collaborative platform where the banks are discussing the project at different stages, and we hope that next year at the Ocean Summit we will be already there presenting the first project financed or understudying for a further financing in a second step. So this is leveraging existing financial instrument through a new architecture, really to accelerate the implementation of concrete projects.
Wow, Andrea, it's very interesting. Wow, it's really interesting. I have a question regarding this. Where can we find these projects, these kind of projects? Like, if any institution wants to apply for this project, where?
Well,
find
we
more
have, as I
information?
mentioned, we had in Barcelona last 23rd of May, the first steering committee that is really in the kickoff of the initiative. And we have we approved the 2024 activity plan, where for the different implementing financial institution, we have identified the initial projects. And then all the requests should be channeled for specific projects, should be channeled by one of the implementing projects. So someone that has a new project in water, for instance, or when I speak about blue economy, I'm speaking also about urban regeneration in coastal area, so the water treatment plan and distribution plan for coastal cities and our touring, coastal tourism, etc. So the project must be presented to one of the banks. So EIB, EBRD, AFD, KfW, and Cassa Depositi e Prestiti.
Okay, thank you very much. So if the public, the audience have any questions, we don't have so much time, so one or two we can take them. Yeah, I can come.
Yes, my name is Gerard van den Berg. I was interested if you, well, one of you is going to invest in a project in, for example, the Southern Mediterranean countries. Are you also looking at the innovation aspect? Because I heard de-risking. So it seems to me that you're not financing standard solutions.
Well, from a risk perspective, first of all, many of the initiatives that I'm speaking for the EIB, but it's very similar from a financial perspective for the other multilateral. working on outside the European Union in this type of country by itself, independently of innovation or traditional technology, is a risk. So a certain sovereign guarantee in any case is needed. Not always. This is why the EIB is combining for certain projects the counter guarantee of the EFSD Plus, so the Commission, and other projects that are safer with, without any guarantee from the Commission, so affecting directly the balance sheet of the bank. But the innovation component is always very welcome. Why? Because the digital transition, the twins transition, green and digital, is the main driver for the change and innovation within Europe, but also in the European cooperation outside the European Union. So as far as we can identify technology innovation in projects in the water sector, but also in any other sector, this is always a plus in the identification of the project. And other issues then in how we can mitigate and how far we go for innovation. So we always, other instruments are there when we speak about knowledge transfer, seed capital, venture capital, that are not so developed outside the European Union in terms of risk. We are developing new de-risking instrument to enter also the venture capital fields, etc. But this is mainly focused, and I'm thinking about venture debt. This type of high risk activity is mainly focused within the European Union.
If you want to add something.
Yeah, maybe I can, because we are, there is, we can see, how can I say that? So I think that water is where energy was 15 years ago in terms of investments and risk appetite and the development capacities on the ground. And so we see where energy is today. So basically you have innovation that has kicked in, you have the smart metering everywhere, you have a clear distinction between production, distribution, and last mile, so production, transport, and distribution, etc. So this is not yet there in the water sector, but it's beginning, notably in the developing countries. And as it is beginning, we see popping up a number of new instruments, venture capital and equity instruments for water in developing countries. And there is one with Incofin, where EIB has put some money. That is a water fund for least developed countries with a super high risky investments that are quite small in size, I think. Then there is I'm sitting in the investment committee of Climate Investor 2 that is planning to invest up to 2 billion euros in a number of projects. And we are looking at innovation in this context. But innovation that are, let's say, proved, the concept is proved, and now you need to upscale the deployment of this innovation. So basically we work on innovative ways to look at waste transformation with biogas and methane and things like that. We look at innovative digital transformations of in the context of PPPs with smart metering and non-revenue water, etc., etc. So this is coming on the board progressively. And then after there is a third part where we are working on capacity building to deploy innovation. So we work through water operators partnerships, so partnerships north, south, etc., partnerships all over the world, where we have this EU WAP program, EU Water Operators, that we will hear about just after. And then after, you have also another program, this ACE Water program, that is a bit similar to what the World Bank is doing, working with the 19 water centers of excellence of the EU, African Union, NEPAD network. And we collaborate with the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, and we ask to this, so these universities are mandated by their government to define the needs in terms of policy development and in terms of innovation development for the operators, the water access, etc., etc. And then after we define that together, and then they develop a program. And so we try to in this context, but of course there is always this link between the innovation and the finance is always difficult. You need to really go step by step, and this is where.
Yes, and if I may, when we speak about innovation, it's not only technological innovation, it's also financial innovation. And in this field, a huge initiative that we are trying to implement outside the European Union is the Green Bond Initiative, so a completely new way of financing, but also implementing what it is traditional within the European Union in something that is financially innovative outside the European Union. And I'm thinking now about project finance. We always hear about project finance, but in the water sector, now for the first time at such a huge scale, we are trying to finance under project finance in Jordan, this enormous project of water transmission from the Red Sea, from Aqaba to Amman. And this is, I think, the first time that $3 billion in terms of water will be financed partly through a project finance. Not all the financing, there will be a typical tranche of sovereign loan, but there is another part that will be mainly based on project financing. And this is also innovation, let's say.
And maybe I can, a last example. I think it's super interesting. So we are investing, we are putting a guarantee now. So we are negotiating the contract, but it's already approved at the board level for these blue peace bonds with the UN Capital Development Fund. And it's super interesting. So basically Gambia, with the authority of the river, Gambia, with the 3 countries decided to co-invest on infrastructures on the model of what Senegal has done during years. And so they co-invest, so they create an holding where they put their own money from the government perspective with a very strong legal structure around it and the planning, a plan for the management of the river that has been already developed. And then after they co-invest in each infrastructure, so they create SPVs, and then after they do PPPs or direct investment depending on the context. And for each SPV, they emit blue peace bonds that are on the markets to finance these different assets that are on the river and that are co-owned by all the countries. And super interesting because all the countries are going together there. And sometimes one country that is, let's say Senegal, is much more strong than Guinea. So they would guarantee part of the credit risk of Guinea to increase the labeling of the bonds and get a credit, AAA credit. So this is the type of real innovation in terms of finance also that is coming in. And that can be super interesting because it can really leverage also investments. And we see that it's also it's creating security and peace. And this is the theme of the day today, by bringing these frameworks together, by having some key solidarity mechanisms between the countries and some very well-defined keys to spread the benefits. Then you that are well defined, you can really achieve a very interesting new kind of results.
So unfortunately, the time is over. Thank you very much for the insights. I think it has been very interesting. And thank you to Arnaud. Thank you to Andrea. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you to you, Ella. That was really well put together and super interesting. And I think at the end of the day, we could have had an entire session just on this, and I would have been very happy to have more questions because even from myself, I found that quite interesting. I'm also happy to tell you that we are now beaming across the globe. We are in Sierra Leone, that we've just heard from somebody online saying how interesting some of these aspects are. We're also in Beijing with Richard Hanneman, that is there with us, and we're also in Sant Cugat in Barcelona, my home. It's coming into my living room right now as we speak, and my 1-year-old is watching it. He's not, but it makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside thinking that he's watching his dad. I'd like to ask Gaetano to come up onto stage, and now we're really going to push our technical skills. Gaetano is going to be here, and we're going to have 3 panelists online. So good luck, Gaetano, and introduce the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, and welcome everyone. So as David anticipated, I have the challenge of moderating some empty seats here. So I have in my protocol that I have to ask the panel participants to come to stage. Oh, here they are already on stage. So welcome panelists on stage on the big screen of this room. A lot of the things that we would like to hear and discuss have already been said. I'm quite impressed by the amount of information provided by the World Bank and by the EU representatives. It's a lot about financing, by the way. So maybe that's some food for thought for us, David, next time also to give a space specific to financing, also in our working group activities. But now back to, I would like to bring back the discussion about one of the core discussion of this working group that we are co-leading with David, where he is leading and I follow. Is about effective international cooperation, because we have heard a lot of good stories from Danica and also yourselves, the previous panelists, about a lot of nice cooperation taking place right now. And now the topic of this panel is why some cooperation is so effective and why it's successful. And what I would like this panel to be also humble enough to recognize that there might be challenges in cooperation. And so sometimes cooperation doesn't work. And I'm not necessarily talking about project cooperation. This is for me the relatively easy one. Yeah, you know, the 1 year, 2 years projects, you put together partners, you implement something, and then we close the project. I'm talking about more structural cooperation. And I'm glad to have an excellent panel here, because we are talking about cooperation that had been going on for decades, I would say, both the EU-China, EU-India, and of course CAPNet with my colleague Temba there. These are multi-year structural cooperation that are taking place, and we'd like to learn from you the stories. Let me give a brief introduction of the panelists. Temba, starting from Temba Gumbo, that has 30 years working experience in the water sector, from being a practice engineering lecturer, researcher, network manager, and development finance, and currently the director of CAPNet, which is a program of UNDP. And then we will have Richard Hardiman, the team leader of EU-China Cooperation on Water, who has been working in India and China for over 40 years on a wide range of environmental and water-related development programs, and currently leading the EU-China Cooperation on Water. And then we have Laura Sustersik, that works with the German International Cooperation in India since 2018, where she is involved in development of river basin management plans, ecosystem restoration, and e-flows, among others. And she's project director of the project support to Ganga rejuvenation cooperation between India, Germany, and the EU, and the India-EU Water Partnership Initiative launched in 2017. Now, a mouthful of introduction. I would like to now give the floor to our panelists. Again, the big question is, can you tell us more about your initiative, your networks, and your cooperation, the successes, but also the challenges? The floor, I would like to give the floor first to Temba. Temba, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaetano. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm joining you from Pretoria in South Africa, where I'm based. I hope you can hear me quite clearly. It's a pleasure and honor, of course, to share some experiences in terms of international cooperation, particularly from where I'm coming from in terms of water education, capacity development, which is, I think, a key factor in ensuring that there's cooperation and also there's peace and around water. First of all, my entry point here, I'm trying to make an argument that it makes good sense to organize postgraduate education and research on water resources on a regional scale. I'll explain why in a few moments. This is because water is a transboundary dimension that poses delicate sharing questions, an approach that promotes a common understanding of what the real water-related issues are, results in future water specialists speaking a common water language, hopefully, and that enhances mutual respect and trust, and can thus be considered as an investment in the future. So we cannot ignore that investment which is required. I think previous speakers have mentioned skills and other issues which don't just pop up overnight. I think that's one of the things which I have to put up front. So I would like to, as we proceed, maybe give you a flavor of what has taken place in a number of projects within CAPNet, and also maybe more specifically with one of our affiliated network, which is called WaterNet, which focuses on the SADC countries, the Southern African Development Community, which is looking at basically capacity building as the entry point. First of all, maybe I'll give you a bit of flavor here. I've mentioned WaterNet here, and WaterNet is a regional network for Southern African countries, or for SADC countries, rather. And it took 4 years to establish WaterNet, to develop the curriculum of a master's degree program in IWRM. And this WaterNet concept was actually prompted by the SADC EU conference on the management of shared river basins held in Maseru, Lesotho in 1997. When the ministers for water of Southern Africa and Europe articulated the urgent need to level the playing field between riparian countries, and thus to prioritize capacity development. Eventually, WaterNet was formed in year 2000. So we are talking about 24 years of experience over the years. But before I maybe move on very quickly, I wanted to mention 3 main lessons that have been learned and from WaterNet. And I think, Gaetano, you are challenging us a little bit more to say, at times, these regional initiatives don't work as much as they would work maybe in SADC countries. I think there are a number of ingredients which have to be in place for one to have success and impact. But I'll come back to that when I talk maybe a second round, maybe when I talk about options for replication, where there are quite some issues. I would say most of the SADC countries are relatively peaceful. So as a starter, this gave ground, to have a regional approach to water education and research, and they've not been any major conflicts for a while. But 3 lessons which I wanted to highlight. The first lessons is that for regional water education and research to be effective, it must have a legitimate ownership structure and a clear mandate. That is very important. I'll elaborate that maybe later if given a chance. And the second lesson is that organizing water-related education and training opportunities at regional and transboundary scale, it makes sense, not only because of knowledge, because knowledge resources are scattered, but also the topic water is a regional and transboundary scope. The third lesson also coming out from the region is that jointly developing educational programs by sharing expertise and resources requires intense intellectual management and sufficient financial means. So part of the successes of WaterNet has been realized because there has been, a long-term commitment from funding partners that appreciate and acknowledge the value and benefit of knowledge sharing. And the WaterNet experience, for example, could never have evolved from an innovative experiment into a recognized regional institution with a tangible impact. So with those 3 lessons, I'll stop here, and maybe Gaetano, with the second round, I can give you some examples of where there are options for replication, and I'll also share some of the challenges that we face in ensuring that at least the WaterNet experience is also exported to certain regions especially in the developing South, moving forward. So over and back to you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Themba. Also to discuss once again, and already mentioned in the previous sections of the International Water Dialogue today, capacity building or capacity development. We tend to work more on capacity development wording. And thanks for sharing the experience of WaterNet. And currently, by the way, incidentally, I would like to mention that we are even trying to expand the WaterNet experience into a more global water education network. So if you are interested to know more, I would be glad after the session to speak about that later. Now I would like to move to the experiences that relate with the EU cooperation with India and China, starting with Richard Hardiman related to the China cooperation. Challenges, opportunities, lessons learned. Richard, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, and good afternoon to you all, and good night to myself. We've just recently started a project. It's called the EU-China Cooperation on Water. And in fact, this project is a sister or a brother project of Laura's project, who I understand is going to be speaking after me. And it demonstrates that obviously Laura's project is successful, and therefore they wish to replicate what she has been doing in India, in China. The question may be that why is the EU supporting China? And of course, there's a various political scenario to that, which is not necessary to go into. But what I would like to say is that it's now is the time to engage with China. If we go back 20 years ago, when there was a significant difference between China and Europe, that it was because of that difference, it was quite difficult to get or transfer ideas across. Now we are at a situation where actually we see China as equal partners and more of a two-way mechanism. And in many respects, I believe that, and if DG Interpa is still there and listening, that there's time. This is the time to really start to engage with China, particularly since it's 20% of the global population, and we're talking about global water security and so on and so forth. So this is the time. But let's go on to really what makes a project successful and what makes a project less successful. And obviously, I think the overall aspect of this is to maximize impact at minimal economic cost. So I think the worst case scenario is a standalone project. And it was a project which I was working on some 30 years ago. It was in order to change the color of the Yellow River, which was yellow because of the sediment and erosion. And then 5 years after the project had concluded, I went back to visit the project and found on the whiteboard the same writing that had been there 5 years previously. It meant that nothing had happened. It had isolated itself from the rest of the country. So this is clearly not a good idea for carrying out a project. On the other hand, there are examples of pilot projects which are linked to the central government. A case in hand here, it's actually not water related, but it was when China shifted from a commune system to a privatization agricultural system, and where secretly a small township had undertaken experiments in privatization, and the central government found out about it, and then it treated that, and it looked at it and examined it and said, this is a good model. And it was taken up to the central government and spread across the whole country. So here you have an example of a pilot project which was brought up to the central government, and it was spread across the country. One of the, let's say, experiences that I tend to get, and this was particularly in the old days, going back in time a little bit, but when you introduce an approach to resolving water problems or setting up a technical aspect, and the general response would be, well, yes, of course, it will work in your country, but it won't work in ours. And this happened over and over again. And then 2 years later, you find that the very same person who you had spoken to regurgitates and says, I have an idea. And then he comes up with an idea, which was actually the idea which was passed towards him or to him 2 years previously. So it means that this process does take time. What formats or what models do work? And I think it's how to hit the jackpot, and that means impact on policy. And basically that means that you have to have a link to the central government. And in fact, in the current project which we're working on, the model which we have set up is whereby we have the platform, the policy platform. In fact, it's the EU-China Water Policy Dialogue, which is the upper platform, but linked to the Ministry of Water Resources. But below that, there's a series of different projects that or sub-projects that we will initiate. And some of these sub-projects may be, for example, water-orientated living labs, or looking at disaster preparation for droughts and floods, to look at WIE, water, energy, food, ecological nexus. So we have these different sub-activities. And then through those sub-activities, we can feed those results up to the platform, to the policy dialogue. We can feed it to the Ministry of Water Resources, and we can look at the teething problems, what was good, what was bad, what went right, which was successful, how we can adapt it to a Chinese setting, and then it can move on forward. So I'd say that is one successful model. The other model, which we had on a river basin management program here, and that was actually the model which Andrea was referring to, where grants are fed into a loan project. As we know, when the governments take on World Bank loans, IBRD loans, or Asian Development EIB loans, AIIB loans, they're very reluctant to pay for the technical expertise, and therefore that is minimalized. But if you can dovetail technical expertise provided through a grant contract, provided through the European Commission, through Interpa, then you provide the technical expertise which dovetails into a project of 100 million or 200 million, and that guarantees, or that can ensure, that not only do you put in a physical infrastructure, but you can back it up with technical training and an exchange of ideas and planning and ensuring that the project goes well. And this is actually what we did. It was in the Yangtze River. It was funding from the World Bank, which totaled, I think, 100 million from the World Bank, 100 million from the Chinese side. It was looking at, I don't know if you remember, but in 1998, there was a massive flood disaster, basically caused by deforestation and other wet regions of the retention basins that have been absorbed by agriculture. But it was the whole process to reforest the upper reaches of the Yangtze River, involving soil conservation and so on. And so we provided these technical expertise for that. And I think that was an extremely successful model. I think the question is, if that works, then, and we feel ourselves now equal partners, and in the current project, just for an example, in the River Basin project, we introduced the Water Framework Directive, and this is an example where China is quite different from other countries. You give it a technology, you give it an idea, and it runs with it. It just runs with it. So in the case of the River Basin Management Program, where we were introducing the Water Framework Water Framework Directive, we wholesale translated documents, we gave training programs and so on. And the Chinese Ministry of Water Resources, they simply ran with the Water Framework Directive. And now the problems of water pollution, which was chronic, I would say 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we've seen dramatic improvements, which actually, in some respects, it puts Europe to shame, because we are still struggling with implementing the Water Framework Directive. And so it's a question of how China did it and how we can learn from China and Europe. So you see things shifting in the opposite direction. So this is basically the main aspects I want to cover. But I think in conclusion, what really counts is, it was mentioned in the previous session, but capacity building. I call it human resource development. And I imagine this Leonardo da Vinci image of Ecce Homo with his arms spread out. And I think investment in the development of people, development of individuals, it's what really carries forward in time. You invest in equipment, that can last maybe 5 years. You invest in an individual, that can last 30 years. And I think this is the key. And the proof is in the pudding. We had a Chinese young man, and we sent him actually to Australia for a year to learn grassline management. And he came back to China and he set himself up a company which actually made golf courses. So I think this would be a classic example of, let's say, translation of what we wanted him to learn and how he put it into practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard, for your perspective. Yeah, you deserve an applause from the audience here in Brussels. Yeah, of course, it's a bit music for my ears to hear the capacity building name so many times in this session. And I would like to add that it's not just about, as we say in my institute, capacity building of individuals, but also of institutions. That's the next challenge, and that's something that we care a lot about. You also spoke about that the China-Europe Water cooperation was a lot about policy exchange. Now, I wonder if that was also the case in the EU-India cooperation. And that's a bridge for me to give the floor to Laura now. So Laura, we would like to hear the stories about the challenges and the opportunities for improvement, let's call it this way, in the case of EU-India. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaetano, and good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure being here with you from India. So let me tell you something about the India-EU water partnership. This is a partnership similarly to what we heard from Richard in China. It's a partnership at policy level. So it's an exchange at policy level between European Union and India on several topics, but mainly around water resources management. We set up this partnership in 2017, and as it often happens, GIZ or the EU has signed a contribution agreement with one implementing agency. In this case is the GIZ, that is the German International Corporation. So I work for the GIZ, and we have been implementing a project that supports the India-EU water partnership. So the partnership at policy level is between the two governments, and the GIZ supports with a series of technical measures and gives hands and feet and action, so to say, to this partnership. Now, what we have been working on since 2017 is, let's say, on four main topics. One would be river basin management, and that is sharing the experiences of the EU Water Framework Directive. We heard from speakers earlier the importance of the approach, river basin management, integrated water management. So this long experience from Europe we are sharing with India, thinking also that India is a federal state. It's 1.5 billion people and is somewhat comparable to the European Union, although European Union is not fully federal, but still we have this central government giving guidelines and directions, and then the national states. So that is one element. Then capacity development. Again, Gaetano, you would be happy to hear that. We are working a lot with capacity development, both of individuals and institutions in this topic. Technology transfer is the third one. So we have very strong cooperation with earlier Horizon 2020 and the Horizon Europe now. There are several projects that were developed by cooperations India-EU on new technologies in the water sector. So we are working on opening options and possibilities for scaling up of these technologies. And the last point, which is also important, is facilitating business cooperations between European businesses active in the water sector and Indian businesses. So somehow also opening the door to private sector in the India water sector. The partnership is a success indeed. The Indian government, we are partnering up with one central ministry. It's called the Ministry of Water Resources. That is a central ministry, and this ministry gives guidelines and directions to the federal states in India, and is also responsible for everything that has to do with transboundary waters, of course, with water disputes between different states. Implementation of measures and projects and anything that has to do with water is the responsibility of the states. So there we are working with the federal government, but obviously also in very close collaboration with states, and specifically some states in which we have developed river basin management plans. So there are river basins that straddle across several states. One is across two, Uttar Pradesh and Uttarakhand, and the second river basin management plan that we have developed crosses 4 states. You must imagine the dimensions in any case. I mean, Uttar Pradesh has got 250 million inhabitants, so that is half of Europe by itself. So the dimensions we are dealing with in India are really staggering. A success factor has been definitely, of this cooperation, has been definitely the fact that we have been working at eye level, let's say a peer-to-peer exchange of experiences and a peer-to-peer effort to find solutions. Example, in the Water Framework Directive, so the sharing the experiences and working with Indian partners to develop river basin management plans for India, which incidentally is not a common practice in India. In India, river basin management plans are not yet developed. So the India-EU Water Partnership was bringing this new approach, different approach for India. But in this development, the success factor was the fact that we were working always at the peer level with the Indian counterparts. So there was never a transposition of a European approach onto the Indian reality, but has been always an effort to develop a new approach on the experiences, on the principles of the European Framework Directive, adapting then to the Indian context, which is obviously in many cases different or quite far from what we have in Europe. For example, one of the main issues in the Water Framework Directive we have in Europe is the whole issue of water quality, so the water quality objectives and so on and so forth. For India, water quality is obviously very important, but water quantity also. So there has been a lot of discussion on how do we adapt and translate, let's say, the experiences from Europe. Another success factor was the desire and the openness of the Indian partners that came to see the value of this partnership and the very, let's say, very close partnership we had with our Indian partners always. So it's always a common approach, it's always a working together towards some common goal and never, let's say, a one side neo-colonial, can I say that, approach. So it has been always a very lively discussion also because our counterparts are extremely ready to express their expectations also, and that makes this experience also different with other parts of the world. Obviously, India is part of the BRICS, so the kind of cooperation we have with a strategic partner like India is quite different from cooperations we have with other projects. Technology transfer, yes, it was a success in the sense that projects from Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe were developed together. So to address the specific Indian conditions of heat and humidity and type of pollution that comes to the waters. But there I will start with the challenges because Gaetano, one of the things you also asked me to talk on honestly are also the challenges. And one of the challenges in this transfer of technology would be the lack so far of financing for pilots. So a lot of technology, very interesting, also to technology readiness level 7 and 8 have been prepared, but the challenge to come from that pilot or from that research project to something that can be scaled up and actually really commercialized is still there. The step is not automatic, is not a given, and some funds for larger scale pilot projects would be very much useful. Japan is very active in India and is also funding pilot projects. So the Japan government would fund pilot project with Japanese technology, for example. And there it's easier to scale up for market uptake also because in any tender, of course, the requirements are for, experiences and proof of concept, let's say. So without that step, it becomes a little bit challenging. Another success factor was also the fact that in this India-EU Water Partnership is not only the EU delegation that is an actor, but also the member states. So there was a concerted and very clear effort to involve the bilateral member states that are active in India in this partnership and to coordinate actions. Now, like in every part of the world, there is a division of labor. So there are some countries that are more active in the water sector and some that are not, but there is at the EU delegation in Delhi, there is a councillors meeting every month where the councillors from the bilateral member states take part. And actually, it's the objective of this third phase of the partnership that is starting now to develop some kind of common agenda on the idea of the Team Europe that is active in other places. Team Europe as such does not exist in India because India accepts official development cooperation only from the G8 member states plus Europe plus multilateral. So it would not work with all donors. Still, Gaetano, I will give you another challenge in this cooperation. So it is always a very delicate balance when we are working with the European Union and the member states to find this, let's say, space for everyone. We have European Union, which is a multilateral approach, and we have member states that are present bilaterally. So this is always a very diplomatic effort to ensure that member states contribute with their presence and their national differences, but also contribute to the European approach. And that, I think, reflects a lot what we see in our political system in Europe. But I mean, that is part of our being Europeans. So I think that's okay. What can I tell you more? We've been talking about bankable projects. So that is another objective that we have. That is also, let's say, in the list of things that we are doing, that always proves challenging. And I'm sure this reflects the experiences of everyone producing bankable projects is always tricky, but yeah, nonetheless, we are working on that because we know that there is financing available. Also, the European Union with the EIB, for example, has signaled the readiness to take up financing of projects. So we will see how we get to that. I think that's it for my success factors and challenges, and I'm very happy to respond to questions if you have any.
Thank you, Laura. I don't know if you feel like giving an applause to Laura as well. Thank you very much for a lot of information. I'm a bit overwhelmed by this amount of experiences that the three of you have just shared. I picked a couple that seem to be a little bit common. This peer-to-peer knowledge exchange. I think it's quite nice to hear. And also you used the word, you didn't use the word decolonizing, but you used the word avoiding colonization of knowledge, which is also a hot topic in our institute as well, the so-called decolonizing science, but that's a long story. I look at David, try to, 5 minutes. Oh, okay, my God. So I'm afraid we don't have the time for another round of intervention. I had a lot of questions that I cannot answer, but I'd like to give the floor to the audience, or maybe to the online audience if we have time. Maybe a couple of questions from the audience here. Raise your hand, don't be shy. I see a hand there. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me. Felix Meyerhorn from Erzen. We're a German-based manufacturer for blowers and aeration technologies, quite specialized in wastewater treatment. Just a comment on international cooperation and our experience in China. We won't sell anything in municipal market, the biggest wastewater market, because China won't let us do that. All right, so I love to hear the cooperation. I'm the first to work internationally in more than 80 countries. We're present in more than 100 countries, but that is still a difficult obstacle to move forward. And obviously, it's something we're still trying to work on. But nevertheless, also would like to comment that it is a tremendous country, a lot of potential, but I believe there are still many parts of China, and it's a big country, I'm aware of that, that has a lot of difficulties in maintaining the environment and the structure. It's just a disaster in some areas, what you can see and what you can hear. So anyway, just also that kind of feedback from a direct business perspective point of view. Thank you.
Maybe just a few seconds of follow-up. Is that unique to China, your so-called bad experience, or is it common to other countries as well?
No, this is very much in China. It is in India a bit different. We are working there also, and there is more like a joint venture that is active, as we are doing also assembly locally. But China has proven to be much more resistant because probably of the structure, and I'm aware that things do not happen overnight. We have quite a solid track record in a number of African countries where we do have a very good success rate in converting things and making our ways to convert the dirty stuff into clear water. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your experience. I'm looking at my chair. Can I take another one? Yes. Another one, Henry.
Thank you very much for sharing the very rich international experience. Usually water expertise, when you talk about water expertise, you think about, environmental engineers or civil engineers. But what I see from your experience is the important role of the diplomats. So can you share a bit of experience about capacity building and training of water diplomats? Yeah, that would be great. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Harry. Maybe if I give the floor to each of you in the same order as the beginning, but I'd like to ask you to be brief in view of time. Maybe Temba, talking
Yes,
about capacity here. Yes.
Thank you, Tano, and thank you for that question. Of course, when one talks about capacity development, you have to think about it across the board. So it's not, we have to ensure that all stakeholders are covered. Diplomats are important, I think, a stakeholder group, which has to be reached out to. But just to also extend, I think in our engagement, we also look at water education in schools. So we take it from a very earlier stage, and we push it up at a professional level, and also looking at even training the professionals who are retired. That's so we ensure that a full spectrum in terms of our approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Temba. Richard, your take on this question.
Yeah. Okay. I can take on two questions. First of all, yes, I'm absolutely positive that the technology which you're offering to China is extremely important. And in fact, I mean, from my own let's say professional heart, this idea of wastewater treatment, water reuse. I mean, it really is the core to solving many of China's water problems. And yet, I mean, you're not the first person to say this is a resistance from the at the Chinese level for importing technologies. It's technologies which either of course, the overall strategy from the Chinese point of view is to create a joint venture, a joint operation, and therefore they can also gain the technology as well as to propagate the technology throughout China. And of course, when you have China, which has got this, like I said, 18% of the global population, then it definitely has the advantage. In our project, we do have a business component, the same as in LoRa. We're very cautious to encourage particularly SMEs to go through the role of spending a considerable amount of investment in just getting onto the stage in China and then finding they're not getting anywhere. So we'd rather bring the Chinese side to Europe. And when there's events in Europe, then we will encourage delegations to come, and we will introduce companies on one-to-one meeting. But the overall point which you're making, it's a point which is constantly being addressed by the European Chamber of Commerce and also the relevant member states chambers of commerce. But I would be very happy to receive information about the particular company technology which is mentioned. Regarding diplomats and training diplomats, or I'm not sure we're talking about diplomats or officials, but let's say in the experience I've had, and I'm talking about this 30, 40-year experience in China, there are these young officials that we trained who were junior officials. We trained them in Europe on various aspects, say 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And now these people have risen to the ranks. Some people are vice ministers, some are heads of department and so on. So it's very clear that not only the process of training, but the result of that is that you've created a friend. And I think when you're talking about, policy dialogue, policy exchange, to create a friend through training is absolutely important. Someone you can call up on the phone and say, hi, I haven't seen you for 10 years or 15 years. How are you doing? And this is basically what's happening now. So I think it's extremely important in terms of capacity building.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Richard. It's a nice point that you made. I also have some stories about that. Maybe I can call you later. Laura, your take on this aspect.
About training, we do often, we have been training officials on very technical matters. If you know Ribasim models and Mike Shee and so on and so forth. So from the very technical to training higher level officials on the principles of river basin management, that inclusive approach. But very recently we received a request from the Brahmaputra board, that is the Indian institution that looks at the Indian part of the Brahmaputra basin, for request for training on transboundary waters and negotiations, because they want to be ready. You might know there is quite an issue with China. Brahmaputra is born in China and flows down to India. So India is downstream. And there is an issue there on building of a dam on the China side of the border. You know that India-China relationships are not very good. So India is not enthusiastic about this issue. So we have received a request to provide training in transboundary waters management and transboundary negotiations, and we will address that request.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your experience. I think time is up. David is going to kill me if I take another question. So I would like to thank you very much, all the panelists, Temba, Richard, Laura, for your insights. I think it was very inspiring what you shared with us. Please stay with us to hear also the stories of others. I would like to give a big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you, David. I give the floor back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much to all the speakers and to Gaetano for expertly running through that online panel with you here in person. So well done there. So you might have seen what we're doing. We've gone from a global level to have an understanding of how we're interacting from EU across border and all of the aspects around financing and the different programs that have been set up. So it's a wealth of information that you've had up till now, but it's only going to get better because now we go into the next panel that might well blow your minds because we've got a really interesting discussions that Andrea will lead us through. So I'll ask Andrea to come to the stage along with Juliana that will join us online, Gonzalo and Richard Edelman to the stage, please, for the next panel. Thank you.
So good afternoon, David. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you all for participating to this IWD International Water Dialogue event. With many thanks to our working group on Water Beyond Europe for the commitment and the time spent, not only for this event, but also for the preparation of the white paper, but the activities carried out so far across not only this year, but across the past 6, 7 years or more, 10 years, that brought us to tangible results in terms of establishing dialogues, to establish connection, interaction. Today also heard quite important point of reference also about water for all and the international landscape that can support additional development of international cooperation at large. So now, today, I mean, we heard, I mean, the outstanding session moderated by Gaetano about, I mean, what's up in terms of international cooperation, global approach, global challenges. But then, once again, I mean, there is also the other side of the coin, which is working locally. What does it happen? And this is, I mean, is the focus of this session. And we're going to explore, I mean, the network approach from different perspectives, from network of local WASH practitioners, jumping to Latin America, and then, I mean, to Africa and Vietnam with a new, different kind of program. And I would like also now to introduce, I mean, the speakers today. So Juliana is a freelance consultant. She has about 20 years experience in the water sanitation and hygiene sector, so in the WASH sector. And she has been working for the last 2 years for the Global Water Operation Partnership Alliance, the GOAP, which is also hosted by the UN Habitat program. As field of expertise, of course, is about water, about safety, water safety, quality, water use, wastewater treatment, gender and equity in water, and partnership and capacity development. And she's been leading and involved in education, research, and capacity building projects in Africa, Latin America, and Europe. Then we have Gonzalo Messenger. It comes from Argentina. He's an expert in water sector, Doctor of Medicine at the University of Buenos Aires. Is the CEO of the Argentina Chamber of Commerce of Water, and also director of the Institute of Governance and Global Affairs at the National University of Delta, as well as the fellow of Danida in Denmark. I need that you have facilitated to Argentina to the world, which is inside out. Water export program, facilitating, of course, also the international technology exchange, and with, I mean, a number of initiatives at the universities and research institutes. So it's important also to mention the matter that you had, I mean, a previously position important at the ISA, which is the utility of Buenos Aires and Greater Buenos Aires, and Association of Water Sanitation Operation of Latin America. Then about Richard, we might have met sometime, yeah, occasionally, yeah. So he studied politics. No, we cannot, absolutely. I think that we start calling one another brother years ago. Well, I mean, studied politics in UK and been living in France, Spain, Portugal, Sudan, the Middle East, and India. And is the founder director of the general director of the Network of Water in European regions and cities. So it's the network H2O. Formerly deputy mayor at Figueres. Political analyst, correct? Okay. And he works in collaboration with many supranational organizations such UN Environmental Program, which represent today here in this event as the leader of a social engagement program of the World Water Quality Alliance. And he also collaborated with OECD, Smart City Committee, the Joint Research Center of the European Commission as an external expert, and the Union for Mediterranean Water Employment Migration Group. So I think that we have a group, very good panel this afternoon. Juliana, let's start with you. So may I have your inputs, your insights about what is your experience in linking local experience to international cooperation?
Thank you, Andrea, for your introduction. I actually have a couple of slides that I would like to share with you and with the audience. So greetings, everybody. I don't think that this presentation will blow your mind, like David said, but certainly will be quite informative. So I speak today on behalf of the Global Water Operators Partnership Alliance. And if I can have the next slide, I will start from the basic, talking to you about what a water operator partnership is. I think there's some technical issues. If the technical team would allow me to share my presentation, perhaps that would be easier.
Now it's okay. I think that now we see the screen in the proper way.
Okay, so water operators partnerships are not-for-profit partnerships between two or more water operators carried out in the objective of strengthening their capacity to sustainably provide quality services to all. So this is the definition, and we have some keywords here. So the not-for-profit, meaning that the WOPs are solidarity partnerships. They are between operators, meaning that they are between peers. So we don't have, generally speaking, other types of partners involved, but the key are the implementers, the operators. We aim at developing capacity of local staff and with local staff to improve performance. And we look into sustainability with the ultimate goal of achieving the SDGs. So if I can ask the technical team to move to the next slide. So we have a basic approach to a partnership. We move from knowledge to change, and this can be true applied to many other projects. So we move in stages in water operator partnerships, starting from an ambition to improve a certain aspect of a business plan with the identification of specific needs. This is generally done in partnership, so in collaboration between the mentor and the mentee utility. The course of action is designed and the conditions for improvement are created. Then there's a lot of work going on in terms of capacity building until well-established working routines are created. And obviously there's always a monitoring component with some KPIs that are here used to monitor progress. Next, please. So looking at GWOPA itself, the history dates back to 2006, in which the advisory board to the UN Secretary General Kofi Annan recognized the potential to build capacity of water utilities through WOPs. There was then a recommendation from Annan requesting UN Habitat to set up a global center to make WOPs more effective and systematic. And then in 2009, GWOPA was founded. So if you can please click now. So now fast forward 14 years, we can count more than 440 water operator partnerships recorded in the WOPs data portal, which is quite a success. If you can please move to the next slide. So what GWOPA is doing is working through three main pillars. So one is enabling WOPs, the second is guiding with knowledge, and the third is mobilizing the alliance. In terms of enabling WOPs, we work with communication, advocacy, and mobilizing WOP finance. In terms of guiding with knowledge, we work with facilitating the documentation of WOP, which is quite a challenging job. And we also work on research on WOPs. Then we are working on WOPs monitoring and developing tools for the monitoring of partnerships. And we collaborate with different institutions on the development of knowledge and tools for effective implementation of WOPs. In terms of mobilizing the alliance, we aim at growing the membership, leveraging partnerships, and we work in collaboration with WOP platforms globally, and we lead or work together with existing WOP programs. Next, please. So looking at the last point, I would like just to share with you a global view of what GWOPA is doing and with whom we are collaborating. You can see that there are other regional platforms that are on top of GWOPA, which is a global alliance. They're very proactive. For example, we have WOP LAC, which is actually hosted by ISA in Argentina. We collaborate with the African Water Association, and we have another very active WOP network, which is Water Links in Southeast Asia. There are also national WOP platforms that you can see here in the map, and one, for example, that is very active is Perpamsi in Indonesia. There are also other flagship programs and projects that we are closely working with. Just to mention a few, there's Waterworks in the Netherlands that is managed by WIE, other programs implemented by GIZ, and the EU WOP program, which is funded by the European Commission and is one of the flagship programs that are managed by GWOPA. So you can see here just a snapshot of the program. This is the program that Arnaud was mentioning earlier during a previous panel. EU WOP phase 1 is ongoing, started in 2020, is going through until 2025. It's about a 9 million euro program, which involves 22 water operator partnerships involving over 50 utilities throughout the globe. The average grant for each project is about 350,000 K, and the implementation is 3 years. Now, if you can please click, we are in the end of phase 1, but we are moving towards phase 2, meaning that the program so far has been a success. If you can please click once more. And we have now the next phase, so the phase number 2 with new and extended WOPs and 48 additional months of implementation, reaching 2030. And the focus is to consolidate all the efforts and achievements of the phase 1 of the program, and also introducing, or actually not introducing, but putting more emphasis on certain elements. For instance, digitalization, that was also mentioned by Arnaud earlier today, financial linking, and human rights. What you can see in the last bullet point is the ripple effect. This is something that is really strongly celebrated by GWOPA, which means that we observe that some utility that's been mentored in the past now become themselves mentors for others. So this is something that we aim also at seeing more and more coming from phase 1 and moving into phase 2 of the program. So this is just, again, a snapshot of what we are doing at GWOPA, and I'm happy to welcome more questions from you, Andrea, and from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juliana. Thank you. Well, impressive. I mean, global landscape, starting from local WOPs. And Gonzalo, can you tell us, about the camera?
Yes, so thank you very much.
Pleasure.
For the invitation. If you allow me, I will want to share a little anecdote with the audience.
Yeah.
Firstly,
you're welcome.
It was a Monday morning in 2020. I was working in my office, and my cell phone rang. It was the secretary of the president of the nation. And he told me that our president at this moment, Alberto Fernandez, was really worried about a call received from the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Mark Rutte, who asked him about the LIFE project, a water international cooperation project. So the secretary asked me what was going on with that project, so I started find out. I had only 1 week working in the company at ISA. Which was the problem? The LIFE project included 2 pathways of cooperation. The first one was an agreement between KWR and the other one with Royal Haskoning, both Dutch companies. In one side, the project was looking for remove arsenic from water, and the other one was a kind of platform to get pipelines more smarter than were before. The problem was that in the first case, the staff of ISA didn't want to talk about arsenic because they were afraid that the population were afraid of being polluted by the arsenic. And on the other project, the problem was that the staff didn't want to give the control to the Dutch company remotely because they didn't trust in which will happen if they would do that. So my work as a kind of diplomat of work was to try to get both parts together, join in a meeting point, and be successful to achieve the goals of the agreement. In this time, I met Lydia and Gerard. We tried to overcome the challenges, and successfully we did it at the end. But this anecdote taught us a lot regarding to international cooperation. In the first place, that the language barrier is a big challenge to solve in the future, because in Latin America, few people speak English. The second one is that maybe infrastructure in Latin America is not ready to adopt new technology. It was the case of the second part of the project, because our pipelines are too old that are not capable of receive such software. And the last learning maybe is that maybe we have elemental essential needs, and we are not able to do the catch up of new technologies. So maybe the donor of the technology may be more patient regarding to our necessities, our needs. This was a very great experience for us, not only as a company, but as a country itself. It was the first great international cooperation agreement in water sector. From this start point, we could develop or carry out 2 more projects with European countries. One was with Biofos of Denmark. We developed a kind of circular economy among our wastewater treatment plant. And the second one was with Aguas de Portugal, which taught us how to manage sludge. This was my experience, and I think it can summarize what is happening with international agreement between Latin America and Europe. Thank you. And if then we have time, we can talk about the chamber. I'm sorry.
I mean, very much interesting. And when I also understand that, I mean, there is a problem of receiving technologies and to deploy technologies, and what would be needed
to solve?
Yes.
Well, first of all, I think in Latin America, we need to get higher skills in staff to overcome such a gap regarding to digitalization, to technology. And maybe we can invest more in basic infrastructure to be able to receive international cooperation. I think they are both most challenge things for us to be able.
Many thanks. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Andreas. Thank you.
Richard, it's your turn with your long-term experience. So we didn't expect.
I'm just going to actually not talk about my long-term experience, because we'd go through all sorts of things which would end me up probably in a Belgian court. So let's just talk about my recent life as the responsible for UNEP for SDG 6.3.2, which is water quality. And as a result, also as the leader of the World Water Quality Alliance, also for the United Nations Environment Programme in Nairobi, where I was for just over a year. I don't know if the pictures are available. For the first time in my life, I'm going to present with a PPT, which is really weird for me, but it's actually just for pictures. I promise you I'm not going to bore you. Okay, so let's start with that first picture, that one there. I want to show you this because this is a very quick way of showing you exactly what we're trying to do and the reason why. That is the River Nairobi. That is not the river bank. That is the River Nairobi. Okay, it's about 90% plastic and rubbish, which is coming down in Nairobi through two of the poorest areas actually in the world. Kibera, which is the second biggest slum in the world, second only to Mumbai in India, and Korogocho, which is probably the most violent area in Africa, aside from perhaps certain parts of Cape Town or Johannesburg in South Africa. That is what they face. 1 million people get their drinking water from that stream. 1 million people get their washing water. 1 million people go to the toilet there. And then if we can have the next picture, Duana. Also, an awful lot of those people leave their babies there. And we're finding on average 5 babies a day that we have to pull out of that river. And that's the reason why you have large signs all around that area saying, don't throw away your babies. Okay, if I can go on to the next picture. So what we're doing is that we're in contact with local communities and we're saying to them, okay, how can we help you? Living labs cannot be places which are permanently visited by research institutions time after time after time again. They have to be real places. This is a living lab. This is a real life situation. This is life or death. So what we do is we say, you know the challenges, you know the people, you know the language, you know the culture, you lead it. You co-design. First of all, you co-identify the problems you're facing. They know the problems which they're facing. Then you co-implement together with us, but only when you ask for it. So if you need technical help, for example, regarding water quality, come to us. If you need help regarding, for example, gender equality, you come to us, okay? But only if you need it. The result is that we have communities like this who are now cleaning up their rivers or dealing with other situations which are water-based. We have 600 of these around the world. What is happening is that we're discovering that these last forever because they're not dependent on financed European projects or any other sort of project which has an expiry date. When the researchers who have parachuted in with subjects which perhaps this community doesn't even care about, they go in there, they talk about citizen engagement, they tick their boxes so they can go to their review boards, and then they go away again. This is the reverse. These are the communities themselves who own this action, who will only come to us when they need our help. But they know that we are there, and so they do come to us. Somebody was talking about water diplomacy. These are the best water diplomats I know. The leader of this group was actually somebody who ran a children's library in Kibera. And I met him personally when I was in Nairobi, and that's how we started off this local water forum. And he's the one who started it. The only thing that I did was to be there when they asked for it. So I would go there, normally I would go there once every week to see how they were getting on. But my question was always the same. Are you okay? Is there anything that I need? That was it. It took me 4 months to gain their confidence so I could take those pictures which you're seeing today. Because otherwise they wouldn't want to know. But these are the people who really not only need help, but these are the people who can help us with our investigations, with our political development, with our social development regarding the issues of water. I think there's one more picture. 3 weeks ago, Kenya and most of East Africa suffered severe floods. Those people who you saw in those pictures, there's 200 volunteers in Kibera, 80 of those volunteers died 3 weeks ago. So we lost 80 of those volunteers. That's one of the houses which just disappeared with the floods. But already they're starting again. Now, I'm using this example of Kibera because it's an easy example to show, and it's also one that I know personally very closely, Kibera and Corogocho. But these are situations that we're working on around the world. We're now converting them into local climate forums. And local climate forums are based on the Cassandra program, which we began in 2021. Many of the people here, in fact, have collaborated already in Cassandra. And Cassandra is the same thing. We're creating local climate forums. So we're converting local river forums, local water forums into local climate forums so that we can look at the effects of climate change on 4 separate aspects. The first one is gender equality, which you can see was very much inspired by what I saw personally in Nairobi, but also, for example, in Mogadishu, where I work quite a lot, also in Ethiopia, also in the Sudan, etc. Afterwards as well, we're looking at how conflict is exacerbating the effects of climate change. And this always includes water. This will always affect the water sector. There's an article this week in The Guardian regarding how much climate change has been affected by the conflict in Ukraine. Then we're looking at the effects on health, public health. This is an obvious example. Here, cholera, dengue, you name it, they've got it. I asked them once, how many of you had COVID? They had no idea. COVID really could not compete with everything else which they get there, quite seriously. And then finally, we're looking at the effects on migration, because all of these are socio-political effects, but they are all related. In order to blow your minds, as Andrea said, they are all related as well to water. Okay, so my message is that if you're interested in one, having, for example, there's a lot of talk about water-orientated living labs. Those are living labs. Those will open their arms to people who come with the solutions which they're looking for, not for the solutions that the researchers are looking for. But they are there, and we can put you in contact with all of those people. And if you want to fight against climate change, and if you want to talk about real diplomacy, where under the auspices of the supranational agencies such as mine, which is UNEP, the United Nations Environment Programme, if you want to talk about really getting down to the local level, then you have to avoid the nation state. And the way to do that is to start with the local community and let them tell you what they need.
Many thanks, Richard. Well, I mean, this is quite exciting because once again, we go back to the concept that water challenges must be addressed locally, with local people, with territories. That means the spirit of the water and living labs. Anyway, you're right, those are living labs. I want to ask a question. What is the question for all of you? I mean, Richard rightly mentioned about the impact of climate change and how communities can adapt their lives, to that. But there is also something else, which is about the demographic growth. How much the demographic growth? The number of population in the planet. Question is how much this has an impact on reducing the capacity of being sustainable.
Famously at UNEA, in the latest UNEA conference in Nairobi, I was asked, well, what is the principal remedy for climate change? And I said, condoms. And everyone went, what does he say? And I meant it. Condoms. Stop having so many children. I was in India working as a journalist and as a war correspondent in Afghanistan and India in 1986, 87. Yes, I am that old, even though I don't look it, but I am that old. And the population of India at that time was 750 million. It's now 1.5 billion. So where's the surprise about climate change? If there were 2 billion of us on this planet living the life that we're leading now, we wouldn't have climate change.
That's the point. That's the point. Thank you. Your comments?
Well, in the case of South America, we are full of water. We have 4 out of 10 in the ranking of worldwide perspective reserves. Brazil is the one in the ranking, and Argentina is in the 16. So we have not problem of water reserve, but yes, regarding to the access and the infrastructure. Going back to the chamber, we are a group of 30 water companies. From our perspective, Latin America can be an opportunity for Europe because of the freshwater reserves we have available at this moment. We have attended, I don't know, 4 or 5 panels during this Water Innovation Europe, talking about the water footprint, the virtual water sports, the need of the European Union to produce semiconductors, hydrogen, lithium batteries. And I think in the future, international cooperation must address this topic, trying to bring European companies to Latin America to produce there under a sustainability perspective. But well, we can have an opportunity to work together for the future, not only of Europeans and Latin America, but for the world itself.
Thank you, Gonzalo. I think there are 2 minutes left. I mean, last question for Juliana, because Gonzalo mentioned about, the problem of skills development, which is also important. Can you tell us, how, your organization and your experience, skills development have been a driver for achieving, better results in water management?
Yeah, so perhaps I would like to link a previous question and this question, Andrea, just talking about the scale, no? So we have partnerships in which operators that are more proficient in certain areas support other operators that are a little bit less or lacking somehow. So if we look at rapid demographic growth, what is key in our field, at least, is to be able to find this kind of matching situation. So to find cities that have been able to tackle the issue of rapid growth very efficiently with planning and implementation, with others that are still lagging behind. So this is our, I think, challenge, and what as an alliance we will need to do. In terms of skill, it's also very important that we look honestly at the skills that utilities that are mentors can, for instance, provide to utilities that are mentees. Looking at gender, we have utilities in the north that maybe are lacking and not so proficient in gender equality, that are actually providing mentorship to utilities in Africa. They are much more advanced in that field. So what we have to do is to be able to really look at the situation case by case, and to provide support in the best possible matching in order to provide skills. And obviously, it has been said many times today, the skills are the key to moving forward and to sustainability and achieving the goals.
Thank you, Juliana. Thank you. I think that's, we have, the last round. One question from the audience. No question. So many thanks for your insights, experience, and the outlook of from different environments and places. Thank you once again. Thank you, Juliana. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Gonzalo, for all your support. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Richard.